Start the recording. All right. And we have the privilege of hosting the Self Advocate panel for our 5P100 class again today. With us today, we are welcoming Ashley, who is a smart young lady who has faced many adversities in her life. She loves books, camp, and scrapbooking. Oh, and by the way, she happens to have autism and cerebral palsy. We also have Michael Tanzir. He is born on July 20th, 1991. He's a self-advocate from Thornhill. He's also the author of My POV on Autism.
Michael's on POV on Live with Autism, actually.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, then.
Which was one of the required texts that all of our students were reading to prepare for today's discussion.
All right.
Thank you, and welcome to the main event. We also have Daniel Bremiers. He is a member of New Vision Advocates, who is a supports community living through London since 2012. He is very active in sharing his story as a person with a disability, speaking to students, educators, community groups, and conferences. Daniel also works as a school crossing guard in his hometown of Strathroy. In his spare time, he also enjoys spending time with his girlfriend and reading. So I'm going to turn it over to each of them to give us a little bit more of an introduction and get a little bit of a sense of who they are as people. So I'm going to stop sharing now. So
nice.
Excellent. Ashley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, I'm Ashley. I happen to have autism and cerebral palsy, and a seizure disorder. I love to read books, scrapbook, go to my day program. I also absolutely love summer camp. I've been going to Easter Seals camp for 3 decades. This year is my 30th year. My last time for the 3rd time in a row. LOL. I was a leader in training in 2009 and decided to go back and try as a CIT, which is counselor in training, during the pandemic through Zoom. They had us in our as we were hanging out in our houses because nothing else was open. I was one of the first people in Ontario with a disability to graduate at the CIT program that Easter Seals offers, and was actually offered a job, but it's too expensive for me to work at an Easter Seals camp, and I'll get into that a little later on. Says during COVID, the projects and things that I was involved in gave me a reason to get up in the morning, because this population was super forgotten about. Heck, they wouldn't even give us a ventilator. If it became like 3 years ago, if it was Dr. Mullins and maybe a paramedic and me sick, needing a vent, then they would get one and not me, because apparently my life didn't have meaning, and that made me feel pretty crappy. But my life does have meaning, and I believe everyone has something to contribute to this world. I'm glad I have the services I have now. As a child, everything was frustrating. Everything was focused on my medical needs. Nobody saw the autistic traits. I actually asked if I ate something bad that caused autism. It's not all doom and gloom. I do love to help out where I can, and love my Smart Alec t-shirts. In fact, I'm wearing one today. Ask Professor Mullins. That's it.
Professor Mullins, Laura is going to ask you what your shirt says.
It says, Mr. Rogers did not adequately prepare me for the people in my neighborhood.
Thank you. And Michael, would you like to introduce yourself?
My name is Michael Dancer. Michael Des. Hajimashite, Yoshikura Shirimasu. I'm the other of Michael's, my POV on life with autism. I'll be taking Q&As today, so please get to know me very well.
Thank you. And Daniel. Oh, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
There we go.
Thank you.
All right, then.
As Laura mentioned, my name is Daniel. I am a 42-year-old male who has Asperger's syndrome. The year I was born, there was no criteria for diagnosing a child with an ASD, which is what Asperger's syndrome is now known as. The actual diagnosis that my parents received when they brought me in for testing was, oh, he's slow, he'll grow out of it. I grew up in a family of 5. My mother is my champion and my first friend. She saw my weaknesses, but preferred to build on my strengths, to focus on my sparks, the things I was good at. My 2 brothers, well, they were brothers. While they supported me and protected me, they also wanted an opportunity to change me, to make me the same as everyone else, or at least not so different than everyone else. My father and I had always struggled to see eye to eye. He was my biggest critic. When I was younger, things were a bit rough. I didn't have a lot of friends, and fitting in at school was hard because there was a lot of bullying. I used to take voluntary detention over going out for recess. Anything to avoid the stress of not being liked or included by my peers. My peers never really understood me, and I never really understood them. I tried to make friends, but people were afraid of me. They thought I was slow, an idiot, weird, a puzzle. I didn't often have success in making or keeping friends, and so I spent a good chunk of my elementary years alone. High school was better. I felt like I came into my own, and for the most part, the bullying I endured in elementary school faded away and I became beams. People interacted with me more and appreciated that as we were all trying to go from point A to point B, I took the roundabout way, while they took the straight line. We all eventually got to point B, we just did it differently. After high school, I wanted to get a job. I went through multiple job interviews, and with the help of Leeds Employment Services, I finally got a job, but it wasn't a good fit. After several attempts at different jobs, I discovered that task-related jobs are what I'm good at. My favorite job was as a dishwasher, which I will actually cover later on. I love doing dishes. So, as you can see, my experiences with having a disability has had its ups and downs, but as I've grown, I've come into my own. I have a job I like. I live in my own apartment, and I have a girlfriend whom I love. I am a strong advocate for people with developmental disabilities. 2012 was actually a big year for me. This was the year I received the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. For my advocacy work. I also joined New Vision Advocates, and I also started going out with my girlfriend. Through my work with New Vision Advocates, I have had the opportunity to do many presentations to educate others about the barriers people with disabilities face. Myself and other and another member of NVA have spoken to students in the DSW, or myself and other members of NVA have spoken to students in the DSW program at Fanshawe College, students in the Disability Studies program at King's College at Western University, the Ontario Association on Developmental Disabilities Conference, and myself and another member also emceed the Health and Wellbeing in Developmental Disabilities Conference in Toronto. In 2019, another member of NVA, the Executive Director of Community Living London, Vicki Pearson, and myself traveled to Whitehorse in the Yukon Territory to do some training to people who receive supports and services at Tagatha O'Shea. This was an amazing experience where we were able to share our experiences and knowledge on the importance of people with lived experiences sharing their stories and having a voice in the supports and services they receive. Being an advocate is a lot of work, but being given opportunities like this makes all the hard work worth it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So our first set of questions are about your experiences related to life with a disability. So my first question is, which I think is a nice way to start the conversation. We know that language we use to describe different disabled populations is very important. Do you have a preference for how you like it to be described? Some people talk about person first or identity first language. Do you have a personal preference? And if so, why? Ashley?
As for language, I say whatever comes out of my mouth, literally. I'm not picky. I say person with autism or I'm autistic. Just depends sometimes on the setting. I get upset with my legs and arms and say I hate being crippled up because I was born in an era that's what they used to say. And is it correct for this day and age? No. But imagine your legs and arms getting worse over time. It's super frustrating. At 17, I could walk with 4 arm crutches and a backpack all over school all day. Interesting fact, the Easter Seal Society here in Ontario in Canada, it used to be called the Ontario Crippled Children's Society until the 1980s. But it was originally founded 101 years ago in 1922.
Thank you, Ashley. I'll let you give us a little lesson too. Michael, do you have a preference for the language?
He and him, of course. Actually, I was born as a male on the 20th of July, 1991. And I'm proud to be on the spectrum, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first things first, I'm also gifted when it comes to drawing, storytelling skills, or I'm some fluent in languages like Japanese, French, or Korean, for example. But it's a long story.
Thank you. And Daniel.
Okay. My preference for how I like to be described is Daniel Beamers. Full stop. If you're wondering why I don't carry my diagnosis of Asperger's syndrome over into other parts of my life, that label is only a small part of me. It's not my whole.
All right, thank you. So what has been your greatest barrier for you to navigate through your journey? For example, employment, access to services, and housing. Ashley?
For me, the biggest barrier I have faced in my journey is no one believed that I had autism. They said it was all to do with my cerebral palsy, and all these were quote unquote professionals. When I was 19 or 20, I got the word that it was actually autism and not nonverbal learning disability, which is no longer on the DSM anymore as it's like one thing. Also, whomever I am with when I go out to stores or restaurants and things like that, people talk to them and not to me because they see this gigantic, amazing chair and figure that I don't have a brain. Literally. And then I just come out with some smart comment. I'm sure Laura can attest to that, and maybe Courtney and Rachel. And then you wonder why I get angry at humans, because I don't want to go out and deal with that kind of stuff. I just want to go out and get, my groceries and get the heck home. Or Starbucks. And this population, as in like developmental disabilities and physical disabilities, we don't need fixing. We just need the right services and persons to provide those services.
Thank you. How about you, Michael?
I'm sorry, which question was again?
Yep, absolutely. What has been the greatest barrier for you to navigate through your journey?
Well, I would say finding new friends with the same interests as me and do things like bowling or going out to the movies, for example. And don't take it too personally. I've done good in school as well as good grades that leads me to doing online courses on my own.
Excellent. Thank you. And how about you, Daniel?
The biggest barrier for me to navigate through my journey. If I had to pick one, it'd be a toss-up between finding a job that would be able to accommodate me and moving out on my own. You see, before I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, sorry, that term is no longer acceptable by the DSM-5, so I'll go with the one that is autism spectrum disorder. I would generally bounce around from job to job to job to job, with a number of them resulting in my being laid off. The only jobs that I've had that didn't result in layoffs were my 2 paid cooperative education placements, hanging tarps over ginseng, and a car washing job where I got fired, and my job as a box collector at Columbia Sportswear, which I quit, and working for a restaurant that was owned by Middlesex Community Living, which closed its doors on the last day of July in 2016 because it was considered a sheltered workshop. As for moving out on my own, that was a tad bit easier, as Middlesex Community Living put me in touch with the mother of a guy who's living alone in a 2-bedroom apartment. I moved in on January 7th, 2009.
Excellent. Thank you. So you've been there ever since?
Yep.
That's great.
I'm good.
Excellent. Ashley, what are some of the common misconceptions about disability that you often encounter, and how do you address them?
Well, there's a lot, because I guess you would call it AAA diagnosed because of the seizures, and would that be right? So if there wasn't any seizures, it'd be just dually diagnosed. Some positives I've had working with professionals were at Easter Seals camp. That's literally the only place that I can think of that's positive. They understood everything, which was amazing. Outside of camp, that's a bit harder. My day program has fantastic staff, and I'm sad to leave, just like when I'm sad to leave camp, but not I don't know. It was late when I was writing this, so basically, I was a part of a research project when COVID shut things down called Photo Voice, and that was the first time I've ever been like in contact with like professors that actually talk to me instead of saying, "Oh, how are you?" And then I'd just come back with some like snarky remark. I still do that to Laura, but nothing's changed. The profs didn't talk down to us. We had our event in February at Brock. I went up to Laura and poked her in the arm and said, "OMG, you're real." And we both had a good laugh.
Oh, I love you. Thanks, Ashley. We talked in your introductions a little bit about the diagnosis process. Ashley, you talked about getting it later on, and Daniel, you talked about how your diagnosis is no longer part of the DSM. I'm just going to ask you if you can tell me a little bit about getting diagnosed and if you think there's anything that needs to change to improve that process. Ashley, do you want to start, and then we'll go to Michael and Daniel?
Sure. Well, for starters, talk to family members and ask them questions. Don't just assume, because what if like the individual you're supporting or trying to diagnose or whatever is having a bad day? Maybe ask them if they want to, I don't know, have a movement break like they have in schools these days. When I was diagnosed at like at Community Living North Bay. They had I don't know if it was like a fair or something going on with like a whoever does that kind of diagnose psychologist, I guess. And they said, nope, it's definitely not what your rehab center diagnosed you with when you were in 3rd grade, and is autism. I'm like, what the H is autism? I said, and then I piped up and said, I thought only boys had autism. And they said, no. They said, no, it's definitely not just boys. Which makes sense, because thinking back, when I was in grade 6, there was an autism class. And I said to my teacher, hey, could I have some of those earphones for Jim? And she said, no, you don't need them. You don't have autism. So I would no wonder I would throw things to, get out of class or get kicked out of class. I'm like, sweet. I'd pick up my stuff and hobble on down to wherever. And it wasn't a punishment to sit and read a book. That was actually a treat. Because a lot of the times, because of my stiff spastic muscles, I'm in a lot of pain. So I didn't want to chase friends around the playground and risk possibly getting stuck on a piece of play equipment.
Absolutely. Michael, can you talk about when you were diagnosed?
I would say I was diagnosed at the age of 3. Over the years, I thought it was a curse, but now it's a blessing. And don't take it too personally. I was trying my best to overcome and accept my own autism, And to come to think of it, I've been doing great through when it comes to my autism awareness stuff,
Absolutely. How about you, Daniel?
I was probably unfortunately diagnosed the latest of the 3 of us, unfortunately. As I said in my as I said in my bio, I'm a 42-year-old male. 42 years old. I've lived 19 years with my diagnosis, which means I've lived over half my life right now. I've lived my life over half my life misdiagnosed, being called slow. The only thing slow about me is the speed at which I'm willing to do stuff that needs to get done. That's it. Everything else, I'm probably faster than some people that I know. Now, that along with the fact that, if I may ask the three classrooms that we are right now speaking to, before you all entered this program, how many of you knew when Asperger's syndrome was officially was first diagnosed? Like when Asperger's syndrome finally received its name, I guess you could say. Because I know when this happened. I know where it happened. I even know how long it took for the medical community to finally wise up and say, wait a minute, Asperger's syndrome isn't autism. They're two different disabilities. I was born in 1981. Asperger's syndrome wasn't accepted as a visual diagnosis until 1996. I wasn't diagnosed until March 11th of 2003 by a clinical psychologist at Regional Support Associates, out of London. RSA diagnosed me at 23 years old, only because of the fact that, and I will be bringing this up again in greater detail, the fact that I was on Ontario Works in 2002, and I was basically told, yeah, you don't belong on this program. You need to be in ODSP. And in order to do that, I needed an official diagnosis. And so the ball started rolling on that. Get me an official diagnosis. If there was one thing that I can say to the medical community, don't try and lump disabilities into already existing categories, because you are doing a disservice to those who have certain characteristics of that disability that you're trying to lump it in with, but at the same time have other symptoms that are not part of that disability. Like Ashley, I'm glad you're on here right now. You and I have certain things that are common, but those commonalities, but I'm fairly certain that you would probably benefit greatly if you had, if there were certain things that about autism that were either heightened or lessened in some aspects.
Oh yeah.
And I believe also Michael is actually on the spectrum already, so I don't even need to address that.
Really, I agree with you, yeah?
All right,
and you got the one right.
Excellent. Such an important point that if you know one person with autism, you know one person with autism, right?
Yep. Actually, I know two people with autism, and they're both totally different.
Absolutely. Interesting. Every time we have these conversations, I learn something different. I didn't know that it was RSA that gave you your diagnosis. That's where I used to work.
Yep. Actually, I even know the name of the clinical psychologist that I spent 90 minutes talking to, Marilyn Capax.
Yes, I know her as well.
And then Dale Monroe actually came out to the Mercantile Restaurant and did an information session on Asperger's syndrome. Now, I wasn't allowed to sit in on that because if I had, I can guarantee you, my brain would have exploded due to all the information that I would have been absorbing. But hey, my parents were allowed to sit in on it. The staff at the Mercantile were allowed to sit on it. The frontline, like the managers of MCL were allowed to sit on it.
But you, who just got diagnosed with something that was really going to
Well, think about it. That session was probably 75 minutes long.
True.
The information that would have been passed out, or the information that would have been told at that session, would have went into what could effectively be called brain overload. Like, I would have been processing so much information, my brain would have literally shut down.
Gotcha.
So the staff, the reason why the way that I learned all this information is I was fed it as needed. Which makes a lot of sense, because then you can control the amount of information that you're receiving or that you're getting, and it's more it's easier to digest.
So they gave it to you in a different way, in a more accessible form.
Yeah, although I did happen to go onto the Oasis, the old Oasis website from, I believe, UCLA Berkeley, and got the clinical and the textbook, like the clinical diagnosis and the layman's definition of Asperger's syndrome. And then I let my mom read it, and she literally looked at me and said, "Your textbook case for this." Like, I checked all the boxes.
Yep. All right. So my last question about this, Daniel, you already answered this as part of your introduction. So Ashley, who has been your biggest supporter in your journey, and how did they support you?
My cat.
You're gonna say
I'm just kidding. Probably my parents and my grandparents, because I'm pretty sure they knew that there was something other than just CP, because they were all born in the morning, but they weren't born yesterday morning. When the school would like send me home because I tossed like a little book across the room or something, I didn't get grounded because they knew it wasn't my fault, because the school was lacking support that I should have had, but didn't, because I was a girl, or well, female would be the correct term. I was a female who masked everything. And then finally, there's been a couple times, and then finally I, just little by little, I don't mask anything, because if I do, it's like I'm in a soda bottle, and then by the time I get home, I literally, it's like I explode all over the place, meltdown city, and that's not fair to my poor dad or whoever's home. But or the cat, because then I dress him up in like silly costumes. But I don't know, as a child, like, even like my rehab center was a big help. The kind of like the one they have in St. Catharines, but it's in Toronto. It's called Holland Blairview. I went there a lot. That's where I got a lot of my diagnosis. Like, that's where I got the CP diagnosis, and that's where I went for 3 days of testing in order to enter high school, because they weren't sure whether they were going to put me in special ed, as they call it back then, or general ed class. And I would much rather prefer to be in a special ed class, because I'm way more high functioning but I needed, like, back then I needed the medical care and stuff, if that makes any sense to anybody. But I did graduate in 07 with pretty good GPA.
Nice.
Congratulations.
Congrats, omedetou.
How about you, Michael? Who has been your biggest supporter in your journey, and how do they help you?
I would say my parents and Dr. Ron Leaf. You see, he helped me find the true meaning of autism. And come to think of it, it inspires me to write my own book about growing up with autism, with my own personal experiences growing up and stuff, just and the book is doing great.
That's awesome.
And that one,
Yep.
it won a book excellence award. That's why.
Oh, congratulations.
Back in 2022, actually.
I didn't know that. That's great.
It's a long story.
Hopefully you can tell us sometime.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I do want to ask you, the next set of questions are about advocacy. So what are the main goals of your advocacy work? What are some strategies and approaches that you use to promote acceptance and inclusion in various settings? Ashley?
Well, for me, that's sort of easy. I've been on this like advocacy route for, I don't know, like 30 something years. When I was younger, I participated a lot in Easter Seals events, and I was always the kid that would help like the kids that were more affected than me. So I would bring them like a toy or whatever from the playroom that we were at, or if it was at summer camp, I would put their socks on if the counselors were running behind, or I would push their wheelchairs. It worked out well for me because that walking was getting harder at that point in time. But I would say like mostly like I learned advocacy from Easter Seals, because I was a part of something called Leaders of Tomorrow, which held a conference in 05 at Camp Wood Eden in London. And I don't know, I just took off from there, literally like flew off. If I'm at my day program and I see, somebody that's more affected than me, just kind of sitting there, I'll just say, hey, whoever, do you want to come and help me write this? And they may not be able to like speak or make any noise, but I describe to them what I'm doing. Like, hey, I'm writing, like we wrote letters to Santa Claus because I thought that'd be, cute. I would say, okay, this is what Santa Claus has replied back. And I said, on the bottom, there's a green stocking. I would describe a lot of the things that I was doing, or like coloring, because there's a lot of individuals that are visually impaired. So I'm just like, okay, I'm on your right side, or I would put my activity book down on my friend's table and say, here, finish the rest for me, I'm too lazy. It's a joke between us. And I don't know, if I see, our building just got new washing machines, and I thought, bloody fantastic, because it's gonna be like crappy ones that I have to bend over and all this kind of stuff. But no, I went down to get our card, and and the representative from the company was there, and he showed me, went around to each like station, I guess, and showed me exactly what to do. It's not rocket science, it's tap. But I guess after I left, he asked the building manager if I was the only one in a wheelchair, and turns out there's one other elderly person here, and they decided to put a set on risers, so I don't have to bend over on laundry day, which I have to keep like a super strict schedule, or the week totally goes off kilter, and my poor family pays for it, and I feel really bad. It's not their fault, but it's something in my brain that, I don't know, chemical imbalance or whatever, because of autism. Just if something isn't the same, good luck. But I advocate for all kinds of groups too, even like the homeless, the kids with disabilities, even, because we went to an open house in London to see if my chair would actually last at Wood Eden, because it's really, really hilly, and it turns out it did. I only lost like a bar and a half maybe, and the staff were super kind, and I cried all the way home because I knew that I was going back to a place that's not made for me.
Mhm.
So it's like, crap, why can't I just live at camp?
Yeah. You told me a story before about when you did present for one of the other classes at Brock University.
Oh, the Tracy Latimer case?
I was talking about when you went to that one classroom that was super
Oh,
accessible.
oh yeah, it was super accessible. I loved it. Have to give Brock a 5-star rating over that one. My dad and Professor Connolly had to lead me through this maze that looked like Harry Potter's closet in the first movie, where his aunt and uncle shoved him underneath the stairs. And I went over wires that weren't taped to the ground. My wheels got stuck. And as a result, that could damage bearings and things like that, which are really expensive to replace. I don't pay for them, but I don't want the government to have to pay for something that's not broken. And then when I got to the class, I'm like, okay, where the H am I gonna park? Because it's all like a theater. It was like way up there. I'm like, great. So am I supposed to like crawl up the stairs? I would have done it because it was my dad's class. I would have totally done it. But no, he would have. I think he would have maybe had a heart attack or something.
And what's your favorite line to do when you're actually?
I'm healed. I like to stand up and go, I'm healed. When I was at summer camp 4 or 5 years ago, I did that because the student nurse was very ableistic, I guess the word is.
Mhm.
And she didn't think I could walk just because I rode around camp in my chair. So my cabin mates and I thought it'd be fun to go over and see her. Well, because I had to get medicines anyway. And I went, I'm healed. And she about dropped dead on the porch. And my counselors were rolling around on the grass laughing.
Yeah. You like to use a lot of your humor as your advocacy tool.
Yeah.
Excellent. All right.
Sure
How about
do.
you, Michael? What are some of your main goals in advocacy work, and what are some strategies and approaches that you use?
Well, I would say drawing people who have suffer characters and spreading autism awareness through social media, like for example, LinkedIn, Facebook, or Twitter. Am I right, Laura?
Yeah. So those are what you use. Excellent. And what are some of the messages you like to share?
Never judge a book by its cover and accept each other's disability no matter what.
Excellent. Important messages.
And never be alone and never be alone as always. Be accepted by everyone else like everyone else.
Awesome. Thank you. How about you, Daniel?
My point of advocacy is comes from varying points of view. Right now, my biggest point, though, is cans have labels, jars have labels. You know what doesn't have labels?
This guy.
We humans do not have labels. We humans should not have labels because labels puts us into these. And no one likes being in a box. Well, I shouldn't say that. Be right back.
Wait a minute, where's Daniel going?
I don't know.
This
Drummer-
guy likes
Like
being in boxes. We do not. There you go. Then there's also the whole okay. Everyone on here, I presume. I'm gonna actually do this. Wait, no. Yeah. I'm gonna do this so that I can see everyone. Everyone on here right now, I presume, knows what the most used word when it comes to negatively describing somebody with a disability is, right? The R word. Let's just get it right out of the way. Let's address the elephant in the proverbial elephant in the room. The R word is the most used word when negatively describing a person with a disability. My question is, what's the second most used word when describing a group of people? Or actually, no, what's the most used word when describing a group of people? Individuals.
Glad you went
That
Exactly
That-
right on, Danielle. I agree with you.
that is a detriment to the disability, the developmental service sector, because guess what? The word individuals needs to stop at that S. We are not supposed to be lumped in together. We are supposed to be singular, individual, one person, each different from one another. Heck, if I had a twin, we'd both be different. Like, I suspect he would probably be exceedingly good at music or art. I suck at art, okay? I'm happy to be able to draw stick people. Okay, I can't say I suck at art necessarily, but I mean, if you give me a piece of paper and tell me to draw something, I'm gonna suck at it. But if you give me a piece of paper and tell me to color it, when it's already got drawings on it, I'm gonna make some of the most beautiful. That thing's gonna come out, probably with more pot to it than you'll know what to do with. But I'm going off on a tangent now. Great. Anyways, some of the ways that I get my message across is just by doing this, talking. Oh, and also I'll probably also delve in. I'll also try to pull stuff out of Ashley's bag of tricks and use my humor to my advantage. I mean, not Laura, Catherine, you can probably attest to this, can't you? How many times did I have you laugh? How many times did I have you in stitches on Tuesday and Wednesday? You don't need to answer that right now, by the way, Catherine. You can answer it later. Anyways, humor and just telling my life story are my two main ways of getting my message across, because if I do anything else, I'm not being authentic. And now here's Catherine.
Drum roll.
Still laughing. I was talking and the microphone wasn't even on, so I'm still laughing back here. And humor it is nice to hear, that use of humor. And he does have many stitches, and I promise I'm sitting by cheaper.
Can everyone see me?
Yep, we can see you.
Section 3, can you guys hear me? Kikidemasu ka?
What did you ask, Michael?
Can you hear me in Japanese?
Ah.
I use my
Gotcha.
Japanese phrases every day. Just it happens to me. It's my gifted thing.
Absolutely. What's one piece of advice, piece of knowledge or advice that you wish you knew when you started your advocacy journey? Ashley?
Oh gosh, that's difficult. Maybe not. Maybe that not all humans are jerks, because of the era that I grew up in. I wanted to so badly be a social worker or a speech pathologist or 911 dispatcher, and hell, I had a dream that I got my MA in applied disability studies. Like, for real. I woke up and the next day and I emailed Laura. I wish they knew that, like Daniel said, we're not the same. Everybody is different when it comes to their diagnosis, and people, we shouldn't be judged basically based on, like, oh, I've seen John and he does this, so why don't you do this? Well, no, like, what if, I don't know, what if the person doesn't like tight clothing, like leggings or something, like, or I don't know, I just, when I was younger, I hated humans, let's be honest, because I didn't get physically beaten up. I would just get tripped with, somebody would just kick my crutch and I would fall because kids thought they were funny. Or they would throw rocks and pennies in my wheelchair, in the wheels, and it would make a clinking sound. And then I would go forward and then I would say, like, the F-bomb, and the teacher would say, Ashley, leave. I'm like, all right, see ya. But it wasn't me that threw them. But I wish that I knew that humans weren't all jerks, and that there still are very nice people in this world, in this gigantic world, and that there's supports out there if you look. You just have to, might take some time, and you might have to do a little bit of digging, even if you, like, email somebody, and that you're not alone. You're not the only one going through what you're going through. It may be a tad different than, Michael and Daniel, but
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it is hard to see the good in people when they're being really cruel, right?
no, that's where a lot of my smart comments came to play, and then I would get, like, suspended. I'm like, all right, see, I didn't want to be here anyway.
Yep.
I tried to tell you it was too loud, but you didn't tell me, or you didn't give me the time of day. A story kind of tying to that is, when I was in high school, my mom passed away, unfortunately, due to a brain aneurysm. And I was writing her a letter, and the teacher's like, "Oh, what are you writing?" And I said, "I'm writing my mom a letter." And she took it and she ripped it up and tossed it in the garbage. And I was bringing it to her grave, like, after school. And I said, "But miss, I'm bringing that to my mom." She did, and she didn't give me the chance to say that mom had passed away. I was bringing it to her grave. So obviously I came home crying. My grandpa called the school and gave the VP hell and the teacher hell. And the next day they apologized profusely, but said it's still not good enough. Like, you guys aren't very nice to me. And you're lucky that I haven't dropped out of school, because at 16 you can legally say peace. But I wanted to graduate because I actually spasm. I actually wanted to walk across the stage and get my diploma, but you had to stand in a line for too long before we went into the auditorium, and I didn't have an aide to help stand me up or anything, because, Ashley's okay, she just has a seizure disorder, let's just send her to a gigantic school and hope nothing happens.
Well,
No, that's not asking for trouble.
no.
No, not at all.
That's just plain wrong to a rep or a letter or something. That's just plain wrong, ain't it?
Yeah. How about you, Michael? What's one piece of advice or knowledge that you wish you had when you started your journey?
To get more help and to find new people to help me, to accept me the way for being, to accept myself for the way I am now.
Yeah, to get connected to the right people.
Exactly. Like to do business calls as well as getting interviewed in order to do that on TV as well too. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yep. Excellent. How about you, Daniel?
What piece of advice or knowledge do I wish that I had when I started my advocacy journey? That in the beginning, it was going to I would probably be doing a lot of stuff solo. Because I didn't mention it in my bio, but MCL had a advocacy group called Speak Easy. There were 10 members. Of the 10 members, there was only myself and one or two other people who would be willing to go out and try to make the world a better place. The other 7 people, maybe 8 at times, all they wanted to do was just sit around, drink coffee, and gripe about their staff, about how they aren't allowed to do this or how they're not allowed to do that. When in actuality, the stuff that they were griping about was paled in comparison to, like, let's say, what happened in 2007 when a number of community living associations in Ontario, whose employees were supported by CUPE, went on strike, and then all those employees ended up going out in front of the group homes with loudspeakers and strobe lights and Lord knows what else, and basically made life hell on earth for those people living in those group homes, just because of the fact that they knew that doing that would probably hasten the getting a contract signed. Was it right? No.
Yeah.
Did it work? Possibly, but at what cost? I'll tell you what cost. Many staff ended up having to, after the strike ended, many of those same staff members ended up having to rebuild or actually have to move to other parts of the associations that they were working for, because they managed to burn the bridges with those people that they were supporting by engaging in those heinous activities.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, that's actually another thing that I actually wish I knew, that the issues that I consider important, when they're considered in the grand scheme of things, they could be small potatoes when taken into consideration, when you take into consideration issues that people from across the rest of the province, country, and across the world are facing if they who have a disability.
There's also a little bit of irony in that situation you were talking about, where the staff are striking for their rights, even in front of the group homes where people don't even have those basic rights to work, period. So
You made a good point, Daniel. I agree on this one.
very good point.
Actually, you want to hear something even more ironic?
Yes, sir. We're all ears.
The manager of the restaurant that I worked at in 2007 may have done something she shouldn't have, but she had the consent of her bosses to do this. And this thing that she did was over the period of that strike in Strathroy here, it was 7 weeks. And so 1 month passed. So this woman basically middle of the month, she went, yep, everyone worked 1 day. So that means 10 hours. So that means $10. So that we could claim the $100 work benefit from Ontario Disability. Because it wasn't our fault that we were unable to gain access to that restaurant that we were at. Now, mind you, I had one advantage over the rest of my fellow quote unquote coworkers in that I only had a week off from working at the restaurant because I knew I was going back to Columbia Sportswear a week after the strike started, but that's beside the point.
Mhm. Well, there are some good allies out there, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of, what are some and how are some ways that we can support you and others in your advocacy, in promoting advocacy? So what are some things that we can do to help support these advocacy initiatives? Ashley?
I would say maybe sit down and discuss like things that we may need support in. Like for me, when I was part of oh my goodness, I don't even remember the name, but the thing at Brock in February.
Oh, our Participatory Advocacy Research Network?
Yeah, when I was part of that, I was kind of nervous to go to the lecture room because I didn't know if my chair would get stuck or like what if something happened and no one in there knew who I was. So I finally got up the courage and emailed Laura and said, which could I please be in your room or Courtney's room, please and thank you. And after I pressed send, I'm like, holy jeez, I actually just stood up for myself. Well, sat up for myself. And that made me really proud because there's been times in my 36 years that, you know, I've just let people walk or wheel all over me because it was just easier than arguing, especially when I lived in a group home type setting and we weren't allowed to spend money on treats at the mall, which really made me mad. So I stashed money in my room.
All right, thank you. Michael, how about you? What are some things that we can do to help support you in your advocacy?
Well, I would say friends or people who work at TV stations, for example, like a City News or CBC or CTV or something like that, you know, or major publishing companies or self-publishing companies to help each other on the spectrum as well too.
To help to disseminate and share your messages.
It's to spread autism awareness on your own, right?
Yes, yes, excellent.
And the message is you are not alone. Just be surrounded by the people that you loved.
Mm-hmm.
And don't let the negative affect you. And stay positive as always, 24/7, no matter what it takes.
Thank you. How about you, Daniel? What are some things that we can do to help support your advocacy work?
First of all, is this one of those questions that you sent us yesterday? Because if it is, then I don't see it. But I actually have a kind of answer for that question, but it actually had a tie into a previous question that you had on the list you sent us yesterday.
Yeah, it was one of those ones.
Well,
If you're going to answer it
First-
later, or if you already answered it, that's fine.
well, actually, as I said, it has a tie into one of the questions that you were supposed to ask earlier. Do you feel that you have had to take into consideration the feelings and thoughts of others when you make make decisions about what you want or to be accepted? The answer that I had that ties into this question is I didn't begin. Oh wait, that's also another whole nother topic. In terms of supporting us and all the others that come after in the work of advocating for ourselves and those around us, two pieces of advice: always let the person who you're supporting know that when the times are tough, and believe me, they will get tough, you will be right there, right beside them, helping them see their way through whatever they are going through at that time, whether it is a weak little storm, a sizable squall, or a full-on hurricane. Two, and this goes back to the previous question that I mentioned about whether or not we've had to make this considerations when attempting to get what we want or to be accepted. If the decisions that we make or that we are contemplating will result in our becoming better for it, show us that sometimes society needs to suffer in order to grow. If you're wondering what I mean by that, close your eyes and imagine society is a huge woodlot, massive. Look in any direction, and all you see is trees as far as the eye can see. Old trees, young trees, tall trees. You get my drift. Now, what is the fastest and most efficient way of promoting new growth in that woodlot? You wait until you wait for the driest of days when everything is like tinder. Then you strike a match, drop it, and walk away, letting the resulting fire burn away all the old growth. A little while later, you come back, and what is there in replacement of that old growth that burned away? New growth. Sometimes, for us to become better or be accepted, society has to burn a little bit to allow us a piece of to allow us a place to take root and flourish.
Very powerful message.
Well said, Danielle. Well said.
I'm sorry I missed that question. I'm glad you came right back to it. That's important.
You also missed the previous question as well. The
Yes.
one about what, if anything, has the pandemic done to
Yes.
regarding most, if not all, of all these experiences, how has the pandemic impacted these areas of your life?
You want to talk about that?
Oh,
Well, yeah,
say
since I've
something.
yeah, Michael, you can go first. Actually,
Thank you. Since the pandemic started, I got to go out go out with my friends at all to socialize. Like it was no bowling, no movies, no dining out, and no volunteering at the hospital throughout the first year of 2020. You know, just it really bothers me a lot. You know, just people have to stick what's going to happen. But I felt worried that I wouldn't volunteer anymore, right? But I have to wait until 2021 to slow down or something like that. I don't know. I mean, I'm glad COVID's slowing down. I'm glad I'm going back to volunteering because people miss me a lot. But it's true, actually. But since 2023 is here, I got to go bowling with my friends, dine out with my friends, and go out to the movies with my friends.
That's good. I'm glad you're starting to be able to do those things again. That must have been really difficult when you weren't, right? Especially seeing as you're talking about how important it is to have your friends in your life.
I know. Can you believe it?
Mhm.
All right, Daniel, if you please.
The pandemic as a whole caused a whole lot of turmoil and stress, and I don't mean on society right now. Thinking back to March 2020 or March break 2020, I was literally confronted by my worst fear come to life. I, for the first time since I was 12 or 13, didn't have work, and there was nothing I could do or say to change that. And so I had a lot of time to sit and think about why I had made choices in my life, like going out and getting a job, working as a cleaner and donor greeter for Goodwill Industries. Don't get me wrong, I did enjoy the work. I did. But when the pandemic hit and I was stuck at home for 3 months, where the only thing I could do to keep myself from going insane was going for a walk. Now, something else, something possible came, something positive came out of the pandemic. The emergence of video meetings. I'm thinking, if someone had told us 4 years ago that the following year was going to throw the entire population of this planet into chaos, we would have all laughed. If someone had then said we'd be able to meet, visit, work, learn, and teach for a period of time from the comfort of home by way of video calling, we collectively would have called that person a certifiable loon, then probably had him committed or prescribed a whack load of antipsychotics. But look at where we are now. What I mean by that last part is before the pandemic, I would have to travel. I'd literally have to travel to Hamilton to be able to do this sort of thing. The classes that are, or even further, St. Catherine's, and I suspect the classes that are currently not at Brock would also have to do the same thing. I would have to travel to London every 2 weeks for a New Vision Advocates meeting. And if the pandemic hadn't happened, the Staying Connected network that I am a part of, as a member of the New Vision Advocates, and by the way, the Staying Connected network is actually a network of people who meet once a month to advocate and discuss issues that are pertinent to other people who have a disability across Canada. Right now, we are in the process of trying to get a national, basically a national disability benefit established. Like, you know how and many people, and I suspect there's probably quite a few people in this on this call that know what ODSP is. Imagine if that there are provinces where people receive more money than what they do on ODSP in Ontario do. And there's probably people in other provinces that don't receive as much. And we're trying to set up a way for that amount to be a constant across the board. And the bar that we want to set it at, minimum, that CERB payment, that $2,000 that people got as as the emergency response benefit, that needs to be the bar. That needs to be the minimum of what we get. Anything more, hallelujah. Anything less, that's not right. And also, we also got contacted by a advocacy group in Australia, actually in Queensland and the Gold Coast, Australia. And I'm surprised that Vicky isn't right now blasting my phone right now for mentioning all this and trying to make sure that I hit all the points. But I guess her granddaughter is keeping her busy right now. But if it wasn't for the pandemic, Zoom wouldn't have made as prominent a presence in our lives. We and NBA wouldn't have come in contact with the Hot Topics group out of Australia. And in December 2020, we had a truly international day of persons with a disability day. And that's how the Staying Connected Network came about, because on both breaks, we basically opened the floor to people and we kept hearing the same topic. It sounded like that these people were literally sitting in the same room as us, bringing up topics that we face in Ontario, in London. And yet they were speaking from Alberta, Nova Scotia, and if I may get a little closer to London, Windsor, Owen Sound, Toronto area. I mean, if it wasn't for that thing that everyone hated, we wouldn't be doing this right now, truth be told.
Yep. Thank you. I just realized what I did. I skipped the questions that are highlighted instead of asked the questions, and I asked the opposite. I'm sorry, Daniel. Ashley, so how about you? So regarding most, if not all of these experiences, how has the pandemic affected these areas of your life?
Well, at first, 3 years ago, when it first started, it was hell because I'm on the spectrum or whatever. Because I'm autistic, I need a certain routine. Like Thursdays, I go down and do my laundry, and then throughout the week I put it away because it's a lot of work when you have to use a lot of upper body strength to fold clothes and whatnot. Anyway, my point being was all my services were taken away out from underneath not my feet, my wheels. I guess you could say my feet too, because they're on the foot pedals. There was no day program. There was no direct support professional or respite. There was no overnight respite. So I was at home, and Dad and I were not necessarily at each other's throats, but the world made it harder for me to function. Like, I need to know what comes next or what to expect. And because COVID's like, oh, we don't know we don't know what to expect with COVID. So that made life a living hell, because I didn't know if one day I'd wake up and have to go to present myself to Emerge and again, be denied healthcare that I should be getting because of accidents or whatever. So I was really, really careful. I actually sprained my ankle 2 days after we shut down and went into lockdown. And Dad and I didn't bother going to urgent care because we didn't want to die. Dad's in his 70s. So all this like mainstream media was like, oh, you're gonna die if you go outside. So I was wearing a mask outside going for wheels, and nowadays 3 years later I'm like, that's so silly, because you're supposed to go outside and breathe the fresh air, not the carbon monoxide, not the carbon dioxide from your body. But the one good thing was, instead of passport funds, just sitting there chilling until the province could figure something out, we could use it to buy things like an iPad, which is what I'm talking to you on today. And it just so happens my iPod kicked the bucket about a week before COVID started. So I was going to save up to buy a new one, because me without music, it's like, it's a de-escalator, so to speak, if that makes sense to everybody. So we were able to get all of those things. And one day Dad comes home with like a coloring book and like pencil crayons, because it's good for fine motor. And I don't want to lose the skills I already have, because I found I lost a lot of skills, such as getting up from I used to be able to get up from the carpet here in our house, and now it's really hard. I have to crawl over to like the couch or something and then use my forearms to push me up. But I distinctly remember giving Dad a receipt for something and throwing it at him, literally, and saying, I'd rather have my friends. I don't need material stuff.
What was your zinger about that one?
Oh, jeez. Oh, I don't remember.
Like, I see all these people doing silly stuff out there, but they won't
Why-
pay for my funding. Why? Yeah, you do it.
They wouldn't pay for my direct support professional to come in and give Dad a couple hours break, even if he had a bubble bath. I don't know. And when we found out that she actually could, that she was just as important as my workers that come in the morning to get me ready for the day, like every other human being. That was like my birthday, and it was like June, so it's like having two birthdays. So we both cried. We're like, oh my goodness, because we didn't know if, we'd ever see each other again, because no one knew jack crap about COVID. And now it's like there's still people that are like, living in fear because of it, because maybe a cold, like a simple like rhinovirus, could throw them in ICU. Imagine what COVID could do. I had COVID at Christmas time. That was fantastic. That's sarcastic if people aren't catching on. And EMS and ended up being called because apparently a heart rate of 165 is dangerous. Who knew? Actually, I did kind of know, but I wasn't going to research that because I didn't want to bring more anxiety. And I think that's what was going on. And I told the paramedic, she's like, "Oh, of course, hospital help you." And I said, "No, they won't. They don't want people with disabilities to live." And she cried.
Mhm.
I said, I said to her, if it became a choice between my dad, you, and that student paramedic, you three would get a ventilator. I wouldn't.
Thank you for sharing. That must have been a very stressful and scary time.
Oh, yeah.
And I once had COVID back in June 2022. Just I had to wear my mask and all that stuff. I had to stay in my room and rest in bed for like days.
So we do have a few more questions about professionals and applied behavior analysis that I want to make sure that we touch on, because this is a class with, that's what the program is about. But I do know that it's getting close to 2:00. So I'm wondering if we want to take just 30 seconds or 1 minute to let everybody stand up and move around, or get a little bit more comfortable. Before we ask those
Okay, I can walk down the hall.
for 50 more minutes, so I want to make sure we can. I'm standing up, but I'm gonna put it on mute so don't see my stomach. This is where you're vamping, Daniel.
Huh? Oh, yes. Good idea. Oh, it starts with one thing. I don't know why. It doesn't matter how hard you try. Keep that in mind to design this line to explain it in time. All I know is time. All I know, time is a valuable thing. Watch it fly by as the pendulum swings. Watch it count down to the end of the day. The clock takes life away. It's so unreal. Didn't look out below. Watch the time go right out the window. Tried to hold on. Didn't know. Didn't even know. I wasted it all just to watch you go. I kept everything inside and I fell. And even if I tried, it all fell apart. What it meant to me will eventually be a memory of a time when I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. I had to fall to lose it all, but in the end, it doesn't even matter. Enough?
Nice one.
Thank you.
Best of all, I did it without even music.
I was hearing
Oh,
it.
although I do have the CDs stashed away somewhere.
All right, are we ready to resume?
Final push.
All right, so perfect, thank you. So I'm gonna ask the red questions about the professionals, and the one that you had starred about something that while providing services sometimes as professionals. So I'm gonna ask that question as well, okay? So before.
Yes, sir.
Perfect. So what are some of the factors that influence your choice of services and supports? Ashley?
One of the factors that influence are the sound of high people's voices, unfortunately, is one for me, because if it's too high pitched, imagine like a fire alarm going off. That's what it sounds like to me. It's like, oh my goodness, stop. Like, and it makes my muscles tense up, and that's worse for the not epilepsy, CP. Oh my goodness. And also the accessibility. I signed up for a couple of Autism Ontario things here in Niagara, and then I called to see if they were wheelchair accessible, and they're like, oh geez, we never thought about that. I'm like, oh, imagine that, somebody in a chair that actually has autism. So that's why I don't bother with them anymore, because I'm wasting my energy I could be using on something else.
Mm-hmm.
Also, how much it's going to cost me to get there, because Passport only pays so much, or will only cover so much. You can't. It's not like a free for all.
Mm-hmm.
And location, definitely. If
Excellent.
it looks like a hospital, not happening.
No, it's got to be receptive to your sensory needs, right?
Oh yeah.
Excellent. Michael, how about you?
Which question was again?
So what factors influence your choice of services and support?
Well, that's a good, tricky question for me, but you see, I don't know what to say. I just don't get it.
You don't get the question?
Yeah.
When you're trying to get some supports, or if you're going to go to different groups, what are some things that you take into consideration? What do you think about before you decide whether or not you're going to go or not?
I have no clue yet. I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I signed up with Autism Canada as an ambassador.
Yeah.
Because it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
And why was it the best?
Because I got to write articles on it. I tried my best writing it. And I got credit for that.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any supports that on a day-to-day basis?
That's a good question, isn't it?
Did you have any supports growing up? Did you have ABA or anything like that?
Yeah, I have mom, dad, my parents, everyone else. They've been helping me with my autism lately.
Mm-hmm. Did you have an ABA therapist as well?
Like Janet Arnold, for example. She helped me on my book.
Mm-hmm.
Took about 2 years in the making.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. How about you, Daniel?
Yes, I would hope I went. There we go. Factors that influenced my choice of service. What choice? I live in a town where there's only one association that provides supports to people with developmental disabilities, and the Victorian Order of Nurses are the only supplier of supports for. Well, they up until I found out that I could get passport funding through MCL. Victorian Order of Nurses was the only person I could. Victorian Order of Nurses was the only agency I could. Was the only agency that approached me, or I approached them. But as it turns out, I could also do it myself. But that's a whole other can of worms right there. But yeah. Now, I do have a long-winded explanation, but I just parted it down for all of us because, apparently we're supposed to be done in 25 minutes.
Well, that's true.
Thank you. Okay, so can you describe some positive and maybe or negative experiences you've had with professionals? Ashley?
Some positives I've had when working with professionals. Again, we're at Easter Seals Camp. I know that sounds like a really drawn out thing, this whole presentation, but it's true because when oh my god, Courtney, when I was a kid, all they saw were my braces and my really cool chair. We didn't have access to ABA because I wasn't diagnosed till I was 19 or 20, and then it's not even covered. Dad and I checked insurance. Like nowadays, insurance won't cover it, which it's expensive. I don't know. I think that I would have benefited from ABA when I was younger? Absolutely, because maybe I wouldn't have been driving around with a chicken like a chicken with its head cut off, trying to figure out what to do next. And why why certain things happen or have to happen in order for like a good outcome, or instead of getting a bad outcome. Another really good positive experience was, as I said, 911 was called when I had COVID because my heart rate got dangerous, and now I know it's dangerous for the heart rate to be that high. Didn't know that, and I watch a whole bunch of medical shows. I had my run-in with the paramedics. They were super sweet. I explained to dispatch, because I told Dad that I wanted to dial, Siri can call 911 because I have an Apple phone. So when dispatch came on, I explained that I had, autism and might need further explanation and whatnot of the questions they were asking. And I said to the dispatch right away, I have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to intersections, so you're just gonna have to figure it out. And they said, don't worry, we can pull your info because apparently Apple phones, if your location setting is on, they can map where you are, which is kind of scary and kind of good at the same time. But they said if they couldn't get in the building, they would obviously somebody would let paramedics in. So I wasn't just gonna, sit here and worry about what the heck was going on. But another positive experience was when I go and visit Shaver. Yes, it's a hospital. And yes, those kind of places give me severe anxiety, or I guess not so much medical PTSD, but I guess medical anxiety. The gentleman that makes my braces, he talks to me instead of my dad. Well, he talks to Dad, but he's like, does she need this or does she need that? I asked about a different type of brace this time around, and he explained to me that as somebody with an adult with my degree of cerebral palsy, I'm classified as moderate to severe, quadriplegic, spastic, whatever. He explained that they don't any longer put hinges on AFOs because our tendons are so tight as we age that from being in a 90 degree angle in our braces that they could snap, like our meniscus could snap. And I don't want a torn meniscus. I have to get to that camp. Priorities.
Thank you. How about you, Michael? Have you had any positive or negative experiences with different professionals?
Maybe I'll let Daniel answer that one.
Sounds good. Daniel?
But I'm never going to explain, actually.
You've been doing a great job so far.
Danielle, you gonna say something?
Oh, I thought you were going to explain something, Michael.
I'm never gonna explain things, but you better explain.
My first knowledge of working with professionals was the family doctor who told my parents that I was slow and I would grow out of it. Looking back, having that label was unfair. I was slower at some things like learning how to read, and I had a hard time interacting with my peers. But looking back, I think if he had taken the necessary steps to have me tested, I would have been given the supports I needed to make school and socializing easier. Heck, I'm even willing to wager I probably would have had a BA attached to me, probably.
Yep.
I feel that working with the caseworker at Ontario Works was a huge benefit because she was the first person who recognized that I had a developmental disability and put me in contact with Family Services Thames Valley, who in turn assisted me with connecting with the psychologist who assessed me and determined my official diagnosis of having Asperger's syndrome. Leeds Employment Services put me in contact with the support staff from Middlesex Community Living, who really helped and supported me to break down the shell I had built around myself as a result of all the bullying over the years through the job training program they had put me into. So I guess I could say, other than the first doctor who neglected to help me and my parents identifying my disability, I would say my interactions with professionals throughout my life have been mostly positive.
Thank you. I have one question before we do the wrap-up question that I think you have an prepared response for, Daniel. So I'm going to ask it and then we'll ask the last question because it is actually a really great question too. So while providing services, sometimes we as professionals think we're doing everything right, where we all our efforts, knowledge, creativity, and input from you, but sometimes it may still not be exactly what you want. Is there anything that you wish we as behavior supports or professionals could do, say, or understand?
Did I happen to email you the answer that I wrote for this question?
No. It was just the ones that you wanted me to highlight.
Being a behavioral support worker to a person with a developmental disability is all about the relationship you built with that person. In the beginning, especially if this person is just starting to find out what their limits are, you will probably err on the side of caution when it comes to pushing them, because you don't want them to get too far in and possibly become overwhelmed. As your working relationship starts to grow and you see this person becoming comfortable and they're starting to find things out on their own, slowly back off so that they can start to take control and explore things on their own. Always making sure you're a step or two or even a dozen behind them. Always on the ready to jump in should the person you are supporting become stuck.
I'm glad we have that recorded. That was excellent. Thank you.
Now, as a caveat to that question, or are you about to ask the former last question? Do you have any recommendations for professionals earlier in their careers?
That was going to be my next question.
Because guess what? I was actually going to add on to what I just said, but I'll wait until you ask the other two first.
Okay, thank you. Ashley, so as we're a behavior analyst program, all these behavior analysts, future behavior analysts in the room, what recommendations do you have for these professionals starting their career?
Well, so coming from a young lady that never got any of that kind of support because they thought it was all in my head. Well, no, duh, it's neurodiversity. Of course it's in my head. Where do you think it is? In my toes? What I've written down a response. Talk to the individual you are supporting. It's annoying when professionals speak in third person. I hate that. Or anybody for that matter. Speak to the family. Or speak to the family instead. A lot of the individual. Why not offer sensory breaks like they do in schools? Or movement breaks. Wish I had those as a kid. Headphones are a great idea too. Even if they are connected to an iPod. PACS, Picture Exchange Communication System, is great too. I use them as needed basis, depending on the situation, or if it's usually depending on the situation. Also, dimmer lights if you're in like an office. Music if there's no background noise. So try and limit like how much people are talking outside in the halls. Maybe put a sign that says, please be respectful of testing in progress or session in progress. Reduce background noise if it's through telemedicine like we're doing now, like no TV or radios on, because as a person with ASD, well, autism, whatever, as an autistic person, a Zoom meeting with somebody's TV show going on, and I'm trying to listen to the presenter. I'm not sure who, it all gets mumble jumbled, and I'm not sure who I'm supposed to be listening to.
Thank you so much. Michael, how about you? As your closing remarks, what are some recommendations you have for these professionals?
Sorry?
What are some recommendations you have for the students in the class?
I would say read my book, for example,
Yep.
to learn more about me. And take some notes from me, for example. Like the positive side of me, for example, including my achievements, I'm volunteering and all this stuff, you know, just.
Yeah. And all your strengths.
Exactly. That's what I thought too.
Awesome. Thank you. And I made them read your book too. So
Thank you. All right. Now that's more like it.
excellent. All right, Daniel, take us home. Wrap
You know what to do, Dan.
My advice to all of you is to always be open to learning. Along with being open to learning, get to know the people you are working with as a person, not just their diagnosis. Remember, the diagnosis does not define who the person is. Just because people share the same diagnosis does not make them all the same as far as personalities, likes, dislikes, strengths, and areas where they need help in. Also, remember to use the word. Also, remember that the words you use to describe the person you work with or speak up for do matter. The language you use could shape the way a person sees themselves or how other people see that person for the rest of their lives. And even after. There are, there are so many labels used to define people with developmental disabilities that the negative ones will start to weigh people down, and the positive labels, while positive, can start to grate on people. So my advice to you is to use the same language you would for anyone else, as we don't want to or need to be defined by labels. By the way, Laura, as I was saying, there was one final question that you kind of skipped over, the considerations question. Did you have to take into any considerations if you were making a decision as to what you wanted or to get better?
Mm-hmm.
Ladies and gentlemen of this year's ABST 500 form, have I got some news for you when it comes to this. In a perfect world, society would attempt as best as possible to make it so that people with disabilities can live, thrive, and succeed. There's one small problem with that. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world where, for the longest time, the strong have been the ones who have laid down how society is supposed to act and go about its daily miasma as a whole. So if someone with a disability, whether it be developmental, psychological, or, Lord forbid it, physical, decides to make a decision that will make it easier on them to live in this world, and that disrupts the rules society has in place for day-to-day life, then yes, some considerations must be made by that person. And generally, those considerations weigh heavily against that person's decision, which causes that person to question whether or not that decision is the right one. Of course, there are those in the disabled community who, after years of questioning their decisions, have finally decided that they are sick and tired of walking on eggshells to appease society, and so toes and feet are bound to get stepped on.
That is an amazing conclusion. Thank you so much. That's very powerful messages there, Daniel. And I'm glad that you actually brought us back to that. So thank you again for a wonderful panel discussion. I always love chatting with you all. I think it was very helpful. I always learn new things. So I'm going to give us 1 second for somebody to run up to the computer and take it off mute so that we can give them an adequate round of applause.
Thank you.
Amazing.
So much.
Thanks, guys.
You're welcome, Courtney. I miss you.
And
you too, Laura.
she misses me most, though.
I know.
Bye, guys.
Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing
All
and for
right.
spending your Saturday with us. Now go enjoy the rest of the weekend.
All right. Thank you.
We got to get back to class.
Ha ha.
Michael, out.
Bye, Michael.
Laters.